Welcome to Book Pop.
I'm Molly Fish.
And I'm Jamie Anderson.
Today we're going to be talking about all things spooky books because it is almost Halloween. It is October. And we have a lot of fun, spooky stuff at the store. We've got a big spooky kids section with fun things. We've got pumpkins around. We've got a witchy romance table with little stickers and extra fun stuff. We're also going to be doing the Downtown Madison Halloween on October 30th, which is from 4 to 6. We will be handing out candy, and more than that, the Lake City Mermaid will be live in person. Literally, a person will be wearing the costume again and handing out candy. So everyone should come stop here. And there's an even better reason to come stop here, which is that we're right across from the Children's Museum. They are one of the best stops on the downtown Halloween circuit. And here to talk to us all about that and about spooky books is Hailey McLaughlin.
Hello, I'm glad to be here. Happy spooky season.
Happy spooky season, Hailey.
Woo.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to talk about all things spooky, especially horror books. And I can talk a little bit about the Children's Museum if you'd like me to, too.
Yes. Well, first we'll say, so the reason we know you is you work at the Children's Museum. And we would love to hear you talk about that and your experience there and what you guys are going to be doing for Halloween. But you are also an artist and an illustrator, and we love your work. We sell your work here at Lake City Books. So if anyone is interested, your Bike Madison print is fabulous and has been hanging in our stores basically since we opened.
Thank you.
And people can come purchase it in multiple sizes here. So we love your illustrations. We also have one of your kids' books that you illustrated.
Yes, I forgot that you have that
here.
Thank you so much. I know. I mean, we're so happy that you are neighbors with us at the Children's Museum. When we saw that a bookstore was popping up here, me and my coworkers would just stand in front of our big window in our cafeteria area and just stare out the window and foam at the mouth waiting for you guys to open, counting down the days. And you've been such a wonderful collaborator at our different events. I know by the time this episode comes out, that Friday, which is the 25th, this Friday, will be our Scream Queens event, which is our Adult Swim grown-ups night only at the Children's Museum. There's no actual swimming involved, but if there's still tickets left, you should get one. And that goes from about 5:30 to 9, I believe, and it's grown-ups only. There's food and beverages. It's going to be so much fun. And then, yes, we are also going to be a stop at Downtown Halloween in Madison. Our Wonderground space, which is our big outside play space, is going to be open to the public for playing. There will be candy and activities, and, we encourage costumes, obviously.
Amazing. We have so much fun with the families from the Children's Museum. Mm-hmm. We love having them over. We get a lot of people before or after coming through. So not only collaborating with you guys, but just sharing a community of families in Madison has been really great.
Yeah.
And you also have mentioned to us on one of your trips into the store that you are a huge horror fan.
I love spooky things so much, and I love horror so much, and people don't expect it because I'm usually sunshine and rainbows like all the time.
You are. You have like beautiful colored dress and makeup, and this was such a fun thing to learn about you that you love horror.
In my job interview when I applied to work at the Children's Museum, they did say what my work inspiration was, and I did say Miss Frizzle. Yes. I bring that energy anywhere. But then I also show up and I'm like, also, have you read the most like recent disturbing and horrifying like Catriona Ward book or Stephen King or Stephen Graham Jones? And people are like, huh? What? So yeah, no, it's such a dichotomy, but I think I know a lot of people, it's kind of like how when you talk to goths and it turns out they're like the most nicest, kindest people you know. Mm-hmm. In the same way, it's just like, yes, I do look like I am like a fantasy wizard that sells like magic cupcakes, but also I like all things kind of spooky and gruesome.
That duality is a really popular combination, I guess.
Yes.
I love that.
Oh, definitely. So yes, I'm happy to be, the Virgil to your Dante and lead you into the world of all things spooky and horrifying.
As soon as we heard this about you, I was like, ding, 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 because this horror is not really our jam.
No.
specifically not my
Yeah.
jam. I think
I
Jamie can handle
dabble,
a lot more
but
than I
the
can.
stuff that I dabble in is more like abstract horror, other than like real scary. Like
More like psychological.
yes,
I know. That's about the level that I can handle. I can do like a thriller sometimes.
yes,
But even then, I'm just like, I'm a scaredy cat. And so we wanted to have a perspective of someone who likes the true scary stuff so that when we're talking about spooky season, I can cover, the witchy rom-coms, which is basically as spooky as I get.
yeah.
And I think Jamie's does a lot of thrillers.
I do a lot of thriller and fantasy. I feel like it's a great time for fantasy too. And
Absolutely. Dark fantasy is a
Yep.
thing that I will that's like maybe the closest I get to horror is dark fantasy. But then now we will have Hailey here who will, yes, be the Virgil leading us through the scary underworld because I might honestly get scared and like walk away from this podcast at some
We're
point today.
gonna
You
take
guys,
a
like just
break.
be prepared. Just
I-
talking about it, I get a little nervous.
That is totally fine. And definitely, I'm all about taking breaks, taking breathers if need be. Pacing
Should we have
yourselves.
a safe word?
Oh, yes. Book pop. Book pop is the
Is
book
my
pop. Book
safe
pop.
word.
Book pop. Stop, please.
Oh, that's great.
But no, I'm happy to help, happy to be your guide. And, I will say thrillers and dark fantasy are often really great places to start. I know this is a safe space, so I can say this, but I was not always like a horror enthusiast for a very long time in my life. I did not want to touch horror with like a 10-foot pole. And, like Nightmare Before Christmas was about my limit as far as scary things were. And then I kind of got into horror by way of just like old black and white monster movies. And like, I think Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock was my first, that's not a book, that's a movie, obviously.
Yeah.
There is a book version of Psycho though, although I do not remember the author's name. But that was kind of the gateway into this realm. And then sort of just upping the ante, each time until I was like safe and comfortable with it. But I always ruined a lot of high school parties whenever people tried to watch horror movies because I would scream and like run into the other room, but my FOMO would kick in and I'd go back in and try to watch and then it wouldn't happen. But
So brave.
but thank you. I deserve a medal. I'm happy to be your guide. So, when you say thrillers, like the first thing that comes to my mind that I think tends to be in the horror section, or is either horror thriller, like Gillian Flynn kind of pops in mind immediately with books like Gone Girl and Sharp Objects, which people are like, well, those aren't really horror. I'm like, oh, well,
They're
some.
pretty freaky.
They're
That's like-
pretty freaky.
That's the
So and
psychological.
I've read a
Yes.
lot of her and really love her, and that's the level that where I'm like, okay, I can do that because there's like it's so character driven still that I think that is what helps me versus like if it is just the equivalent of jump scares but in a book.
Yeah.
I feel like that is what I can't handle, right? Where it feels like gratuitous or just trying to scare you versus like things like Sharp Objects. I mean, there's real depth and meaning, and maybe there is in horror too. You're here to tell us about that and other stuff, but sometimes I just feel like it's like they're trying to. I feel resentful of horror films and books where I'm like, you're just trying to scare me, and then it makes me not enjoy it. Whereas like if I happen to get scared, but I feel like they're trying something else, like you can trick me into reading horror.
Horror is so, I think, serves a very specific purpose. And, I also I have a lot of contention with jump scares too. For the viewers at home, you can't see, but like when I go see horror movies, I use my thumbs to plug my ears and then my fingers to cover my eyes because I do not like being jump scared at all. But I do like to go see horror movies. But I like the ambience and I like the design of a monster, and I like, most horror movies and horror books are usually commentary on something bigger.
Sure.
And I like connecting those dots. And what I like especially about, books like Sharp Objects and Gillian Flynn's work is usually it's a social commentary. Every time I have a friend who goes through a breakup, I might have to recite like the Gone Girl, like cool girl monologue to her because usually her boyfriend is very lame and it's like, you need to go, we're going to go watch Gone Girl or we're going to read Gone Girl right now. As far as thrillers go, I think those are great ways to kind of dabble and step into horror. If you don't feel quite brave enough yet, if you want like the tension that accompanies a lot of horror books, but don't necessarily want the spooky scary or the gore or the like horror of it all, then like start there. That's a good level to start at. I think if you're more of a visual person too, starting off with graphic novels, because since those, you consume the information faster because it's visual. Like sometimes the imagery, yes, is scary, but I find that a lot of people will pick a graphic novel over a book that you read because you're not trying to read and it's not taking as long, and it's there and you have the option to turn the page. Horror fans, I'm going to say, like the horror graphic novelist right now, and that's Junji Ito. Have you ever read any of his works?
No.
So like Uzumaki is very famous. That's a collection of works. He has a couple of other books that names escapes me, but he typically does short horror stories. And horror serves short storytelling so well.
Yeah.
So that's also, if you also grapple with getting into horror, I recommend any short story collection. Any like Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House is kind of like, that is, as far like, I know a lot of people say like Mary Shelley and H.P. Lovecraft, and those are kind of the names you think of horror. But if you want like really, I feel the change from modern to contemporary horror, you want to pick Shirley Jackson and read some of her short stories. But circling a little bit back, Junji Ito is a Japanese manga author, and he's like the king of horror graphic novels. His works are so very visually good, and just kind of like heart pounding as you read them. And he's very good at using the method of graphic novels, where when you're illustrating a graphic novel, you want your reader to turn to the next page. And you get that creeping feeling when you're reading his books where it's like, I know something is building and something's very scary, but I don't want to turn the page.
Right.
But
I don't want to look, but I have to look.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely, if you're jumping into it, it's like, okay, I want a bigger scare, but I don't think I'm ready to read a paragraph about viscera. So next step is graphic novels. And I like to say the kind of, if Junji Ito is what is the most popular coming out of like the world of manga, then stateside, although she is Canadian, Emily Carroll is kind of his match. She is the queen of the horror graphic novels. So any works by Emily Carroll, especially I wrote down A Guest in the House. That's one of her more long form comics, but again, fantastic. And she also does like short anthology works that I really love.
Wow, so many great recommendations
No kidding.
already.
I'm like, I need to start keeping a list.
I know. Well,
You're convincing me already.
Oh, yes.
Luckily, we'll write them down for folks and put them in the show notes. But we do usually start by asking, what are you reading now? Do you find yourself like throughout the year you're reading horror all year round, or do you really like focus it on spooky season? What is your like reading trends, I guess, in your life, and what are you reading right now?
So this is going to be really funny. So what I'm reading right now, it's actually so hilarious because I do listen to horror year around. I tend to switch back and forth between horror books and whatever critically acclaimed graphic novel is out, and then a lot of environmental biology, a lot of like how nature affects the future, and I thank my job and my wonderful coworkers for that. However, right now, I downloaded it to my Libro app on October 1st. I was reading Codependent No More by Melody Beatty, which is, scary in its own way.
I was going to say, that's its own kind of horror right there.
Yeah, I know.
Dun, dun, dun.
I was, which I finished it like in the last day or two, and it was very good, very helpful. Gained a lot of insight. Was not as scary confronting those emotions and feelings and memories as I thought it was going to be. So a horror book of a different kind, but it filled me with similar feelings of dread and tension. But the last horror book I read, I believe was The September House by, sorry, I have it. by Carissa Orlando, and that was exceptionally good and kind of funny. If another great way to segue into horror is to read horror comedy.
Yep.
So if you can handle like spooky imagery but intermingled with like a little bit of humor, then the September House is really good, especially if you like a haunted house story specifically. A lot of people in horror tend to have favorite specific subgenres, and like some people there's like, I wouldn't go near that subgenre with a 10-foot pole. Like, I'm not very much into body horror of any kind. I tend to stay away from that, although I did see The Substance last night and that movie was phenomenal, and I would go see it again. But I like a haunted house story too, and that also, like I was saying, kind of about horror comedy. Grady Hendrix is like Mr. Horror Comedy. He's really dominating the genre right now, and he's on a book tour for his new book, which I think is like, nope, I don't remember the title at all. Sorry. But I want him to come here. So if there's a way for you to get him to come here, then please do it. But my favorite Grady Hendrix book is How to Sell a Haunted House, which is about another one of my favorite subgenres of horror, which is spooky toys or spooky puppets, specifically in this book.
Okay.
So if you need, I know you're jonesing for a spooky puppet book, then definitely How to Sell a Haunted House. And in fact, so I love horror. My mom is a horror hater. She will not broach the genre, but we were on vacation recently and I was able to get her to start reading The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. So, you know, if my mom can read horror, I think anybody can read horror. And definitely Grady Hendrix is like, his material is really funny. His plots are kind of very much in the vibe of like a whodunit mystery, where it's like you can kind of figure it out, but sometimes it's a little bit unpredictable. The characters are always really interesting. And, you know, I just said that How to Sell a Haunted House was my favorite Grady Hendrix books, but really, I do think The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is his best book. So really, you can't go wrong with any of them. I know my best friend's Exorcism was turned into a not super good movie, but the book is better.
I have a theory that good books make bad movies.
True.
So
I agree.
Yeah.
I do like the hint of mixing humor in, because I feel like the only horror movies I have actually enjoyed are the like 80s like Evil Dead. But I guess like in terms of an actual what's considered like those, I don't know, B movies, right? And I'm sure Hailey could correct me on what the genres are, but the humor in that and the, I think, over the top camp.
Yeah.
Because I love that aspect of movies, I think. And so camp can kind of, then I don't mind like some gore if it's really campy.
Right.
Like, I don't mind a jump scare when it's like so well projected that like, I know it's coming and you know exactly when it's going to happen, right? So like Evil Dead is the level that I can, I don't know, handle of a horror movie.
Yeah. I think something happened to me when I had kids and I was like, no more horror. I don't want to be scared.
Life
I don't
is
want
too
bad things
scary
to
as
happen.
it is.
Yeah, a little bit like that. But I'm more away from that now.
Have you read any spooky season books, Jamie, this fall or recently? What are you reading?
Now I don't want to say the author's name. I'm like so nervous about it.
It's okay. Again, this is a safe space.
It's a safe space.
Okay, so recently I read The Night Guest by Hildur. Molly, help me.
I just made it up. I said Hildur Knutsdottir.
Okay, she's
That's what it
Icelandic,
looks like to
obviously.
me. Yeah.
And the story takes place in Iceland, and the characters, I can't pronounce any of their names. But it was definitely more like the psychological abstract, like the ending of it. I'm still not sure what happened. It follows this girl whose sister died, and she like wakes up every morning and she's tired and like there's leaves in her hair and stuff has happened that she can't explain. So she starts filming herself while she's sleeping, and she watches the video back and she's like getting up and looking at the camera and smiling and walking away. And then hours later she comes back and like goes back to bed and can't really explain where she's been for those hours. Or
So is the night guest like herself? She has like a guest like taking over her body or something?
or is it her dead sister who comes back and takes over her body?
Ooh, that
and
sounds
is
really
doing
good.
bidding, and like all these cats end up dying, which I didn't really like. She's like allergic to cats, but they like her. And
Is she killing them at night?
yeah, I think so.
Oh, shit. That's sad.
Right? And then
Trigger warning for that book.
I wish I could say more about it, but it's just like, what the hell?
And it was short too. It was kind of like a
it's
novella
very short.
size.
Yeah. It's like takes 2 hours to read.
So what subgenre would you call that, Hailey? Of
I mean,
it's like possession.
It's definitely sounding. I would say. I mean, I can't be sure how it ends, but for me, that's sounding like psychological horror, which is one of my favorite subgenres, and also like having an unreliable narrator.
Yes,
Ooh,
which
yeah.
I also love.
Yes, you do.
Ooh,
Yeah.
love me an unreliable narrator. It's like staring in a mirror. I'm the unreliable narrator of my life.
Aren't we all?
Oh my God, I love that.
If you like that book, though, I have one that I think you would like, and also the cat lives in it.
Oh, that's
Thank
what I need
God.
in my life.
Thank
So one of my favorite horror books that I've read in the last 2-ish years is The Last House on Needless Street by Catronia Ward, and she's made some pretty big waves in the horror book world in the last few years. But that book has multiple unreliable narrators, and is so good, and just she paints a really beautiful picture. And it's just about kind of this reclusive man who lives in this house, and it seems kind of unclear as to why, and weird things start happening in his house. And he has a cat that he loves. The cat is one of the narrators.
Love it.
So I won't tell you anymore because I don't want to give away too much. I feel like I've already said too much, but it's probably my favorite horror book I've read in the last year.
Okay.
We have to talk about this too because you just showed us. We want to shout out your Instagram account where you redesign the covers of. Is it horror books specifically?
Yeah, specifically.
And you did that one. And you just showed us the redesigned cover. It was so fabulous. I mean, you're a great artist and illustrator. So it's really fun to be able to see the process too. So can you talk a little bit about your Instagram? I mean, tell us your handle and then tell us about your cover redesign project.
So my Instagram handle is at Hailey TJ McLaughlin. And hopefully you can put that in the podcast notes because that's going to take too much time to spell. So I studied illustration and I'm a picture book illustrator. So I do these reels intermittently. Can't guarantee I do them too frequently, but where I take horror books that I really enjoy and I do a little bit of a review of them, and then I redesigned the cover as a picture book cover instead. So very kid-friendly, very cutesy, but please don't read these books to children.
I love
Good disclosure,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I also co-host, for all local Madison listeners out there, me and my friend Hillary Falk of Fovea Works, we also are co-hosts of the Friday the 13th event where we make weird Furby art with a ton of really talented Wisconsin and otherwise artists.
That's amazing. Tell us about your next, February the 13th event. Is that the next one?
So the next one is actually going to be in June, and it's going to be a Pride Month, Friday the 13th event.
13th.
Yes.
I love it.
You're welcome.
Yes. What are you reading that's spooky?
Nothing. I was trying to think of the last horror book I even read. And I think, you mentioned, Jamie, you're like, something happened when I had kids, didn't want to do horror.
Yeah.
To me, I think it was, I tried to read Dracula way too young because I was reading, Sherlock Holmes and stuff that felt like classics, and I was loving them. And I was kind of moving towards thrillery stuff from mystery, right? I was much more mystery side. And I was like, oh, well, that's a classic and everybody recommends it and I'll read that. And then I didn't sleep for a week in middle school because I had nightmares and still have issues with Dracula as a
Concept.
There's something that embedded itself back there in the back of my brain and doesn't
this
let
is
go.
Really funny because we just rewatched Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Oh,
With the Dracula musical. I feel like that's a good way to get over it.
I would see that Dracula musical that Jason Segel wrote in
I
Forgetting
know.
Sarah Marshall. I love that movie and I love his musical, and it's puppets, and I can handle anything with puppets. But I really haven't read much spooky. I feel like The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo was like a dark fantasy that I read recently. Again, not horror elements, but some, kind of horror-y stuff.
A little spooky.
It's got a little spookiness. It's got devils and, and scorpions and a little violence, but I really like it when it's in again, I feel like a fantasy element usually helps me, just like humor will help me to distract me from like, oh, this isn't real.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Dracula just screwed me up. And I have like full on, you said you left the room screaming from sleepovers. I had like full on panic attacks. And it was more like, I remember like high school boyfriends and college boyfriends being like, no, you'll love this movie. Let's just sit down and watch it. And I think they were like making fun of me or something because they knew how scared I would be and thought that, oh, they'll comfort me or something after I get scared.
Not good boyfriends.
Honestly, yeah. That's a whole different thing. But exactly. And so that was part of it, is I feel like I was forced to watch a lot of those movies because that's what like all these guys I was hanging out with, not all these guys. Let's cut that.
We get it, Molly. You were so cool in high school.
So many boyfriends. But it was like throughout I feel like my formative years, and then I got resentful of it, and I almost was like, now I never want to watch them.
No more horror.
Even when I would like it potentially, or I think I just got like people are always trying to get me to like, no, it's good. You won't get scared. And it's like, no, I will.
Yeah.
Trust me. I know my own feelings. Anyway, I will say, so a couple years ago, I read The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling, which is like a classic witchy rom-com.
Cute.
This is like the level of spooky book that I do. And she has every year come out with a new book in that series. And it's all like, a witchy little Salem-y town. And there are real witches there. And a new guy comes to town every book that's like gonna fall in love with somebody, and they have to uncover some mystery in like a haunted house, and it's just like, it's cute, and there's like always like we have to hide in the closet together, and then maybe we make out a little bit in the closet, which is like, again, the level of spooky that I can handle, because then it's like two forms of tension, right? Then there will be like a sexual tension and a horror tension, and I can just like focus on the sexual tension part.
See, I typically don't read romance novels, so that's something I would be interested to jump into.
For you.
Yeah.
I was going to say witchy romance might be a good way. There's like a couple really cute ones that we got this year. Like Happy Medium about a medium. I know we have our table dismantled right now, but yeah.
The Honey Witch is one that I wanted.
The Honey Witch looked like a very cozy witchy fantasy.
I think between reading like oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the title. The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones and The Ritual by Adam Neville. I read Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Yeah.
So, just a little palate cleanser.
Yeah, I love that.
That's
sometimes
a great palate
I love
cleanser.
horror, but sometimes I do a little like, oh, I'm going to have a little a little historical nonfiction, a little bit of like what's going on in the world of this or something. But yeah, it's nice.
I normally pick like a spooky book to focus on, and I normally pick with my boyfriend like a spooky-ish movie to watch every year.
Cute.
And so and I try to push myself because he really likes horror and I don't. And I'll be like, well, we can watch like one, and he can help recommend if he thinks there's one I could handle. And usually I default to Nightmare Before Christmas. Let's be real.
Cute.
But this year for my spooky book, I guess, Hailey, I'd love some recommendations from you. And I feel like you're already giving great ones. But one I was thinking about doing was Never Whistle at Night, which is indigenous short stories, right? Horror stories. And now I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Right. And I feel like, again, this would be right up my alley, where it's like folklore-y, fantasy horror in short stories, which then I can kind of like stop and put down and walk away from.
Yeah.
Have you read that?
I haven't yet. It's on my like to be read list.
I want to read it too. Yeah.
But I've only heard good things. It's like on every time
it's blowing up. Well, and I always am watching sales and like what is really popular, and it has been all summer. It has been super popular, and then even picked up even more for spooky season. And I was like, I mean, that might be a good one for me to wade into. Maybe that'll be my spooky book.
Definitely.
And not another witchy romance.
I mean,
You're going to do that too?
I'll probably do that too.
read
I
them.
got time. I got time. I can do a couple.
I think the key to getting into horror is to, go at your own pace and to really wade in. You mentioned kind of pushing away from horror as you got more into motherhood. And I have a lot of friends who are moms. I'm not a mom, but the ones I talk to, they either really steer clear of horror or they get a lot of moms I know have a traumatizing childbirth experience, and after that trauma they get into horror. And I had a friend who swore off it, and then she had a bad childbirth experience, and then she's like, actually, it doesn't scare me anymore.
Fascinating.
Good
I
point.
know. And that tends to be a lot of people who like either were very not into horror and then got into horror, like went through something and then are like, actually, I need something to match the level of anxiety that I have now. And that's a lot of people. I know a lot of people who go through something like that. It's really interesting.
It is interesting. I love that. We were just talking about when you do something really hard, it makes the stuff that you normally do that maybe you thought it was hard before, it makes it feel really easy.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's almost that same effect of like, wanting the relatability of something scary to make you feel less alone and isolated in your experience.
Yeah. Wow.
Different perspective.
Perspective.
Well, I'd love to talk more about subgenres. That's something that I like. I love thinking about the fantasy subgenres, which is like my jam. Even romance subgenres, historical. I mean, every genre has subgenres. But could you tell us a little more about some of the most popular horror subgenres and what your favorites are?
Definitely. I mean, sometimes monsters have their own subgenre, so I think vampire is its entire
totally.
subgenre. Not friend of the podcast, Allie Ward of Ologies, has a really cool episode on. Actually, it's a 2-feature episode on vampires and vampirology. So definitely, if you want to deep dive from there, but I think vampires are a really popular subgenre. You talked about maybe staying away from vampires.
Probably, yeah.
But if you're looking for a vampire fix, I would recommend Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. And he wrote, it's really a very poignant vampire book, and it's about kind of maybe circling back to mothers and motherhood. It's about parenting a vampire child and this family who goes through this loss of a child and then brings the child back, and the child is now a vampire, and how are they going to deal with that? But if you want to, go with a classic, I usually recommend Interview with a Vampire for people, because it's, again, a good entry-level horror book for most people. It's not too gruesome. And then you have a bunch of movies and TV shows to watch after you've read it. Some more subgenres that I really enjoy are the haunted house, I think, is probably my favorite genre. And my favorite haunted house book, if you're going for a laugh, like I said, How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. If you want something to rock your world, then you cannot go wrong with House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. I know you've had that on your shelf for a while.
We had it on our feature table the other week because it was blowing up too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's really cool.
Uh-huh.
And that book it's so cool and so special, and like it changes the chemistry of your brain. I don't know what better way to explain it, but as you read it, a general synopsis is the main character, who I think is named John or Johnny, he goes and helps his friend clean out an apartment where the tenant, I think, dies, and they find the manuscript for a documentary of a movie that isn't real. He can't find outside this manuscript like the actual documentary. And so you are reading this manuscript as he is reading it, and like the orientation of the words on the page shift. So you have to flip the book upside down to read it. And sometimes there's only like one word printed on a page. And there's shout out to Mark Danielewski, because the madman, there's bibliographies of all these writers and these academics talking about this haunted house and this manuscript for a documentary that doesn't exist. And you feel like you're going crazy as the main character goes crazy. And within this haunted house that the documentary is on, there's a closet that leads to a labyrinth that isn't like dimensionally possible within the confines of the house. So it's a book I tend to, no matter where people are at in their level of horror consumption, or if they're just like the sweetest little baby angel face, like has never touched a spooky, scary book, I'm like, I don't care. You need to read this book. It's life-changing. Read House of Leaves.
You just want to break people's brains.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. I need to talk about my emotional process with that book. So I'm trying to tell other people so then I can have some therapy about it.
Oh, that's all we do. That's all we do is recommend books that we want to talk
And then
to
come
people
back
about.
and talk to us.
Yeah.
I'm looking through my list that I hastily wrote down before I started, but I love a creature feature book, which most horror books, if they're not supernatural or they're not psychological, most books it's like you want a good monster, right? You want a good monster that either is gonna. You ever notice how like in horror books, horror movies, the monster either like is died or is murdered or killed, or the monster wins. And sometimes I like it when the monster wins. I'm like, you know what? The monster did nothing wrong.
Right.
The monster's fine. The monster deserves to win. And I'll tell you about a book that I would not encourage either of you to read because it was almost too scary for me. And I stayed up, I listened to the audiobook and I stayed up till 4 a.m. And did really bad the next day at work
Oh no.
listening to it, but I'd be remiss. It came out this past summer, but it's Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. And that book has been very hot this past summer and into autumn. Very scary. Very much was messing me up while I was listening to it. Basic premise, I like to tell people is like, what if Coraline was rated R? So it is about a young girl in this book who every night she is visited by other mommy, and that should set your teeth on edge enough. The book is narrated by this young girl. I think she's 8 years old. It's just scary because it's all from a child's perspective. So I think it describes other mommy as like she'll just very casually say like, other mommy was talking to me and her eyes started to slide down her face and her arms were covered with hair. She says, let me come into your heart, and trade places with her. And it's like, well, where is she going to go? You know?
Oh, no.
And
It's something about that direct perspective of children and like the way they describe things that makes it scarier, right?
oh yeah. Children in horror books, it's like, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes there are certain books where it's like this one where it's like, maybe, you know, if you're a parent, stay pretty clear of this one. This is Jamie. Don't do it.
Nope. This is a no for me.
But it's for anybody else who can kind of stomach that. I definitely, it writes the author, Josh Malerman, he wrote tension so well into this book. And he really, I think, understood the perspective of a child. And kind of, I liked the parents in this book because they took their child pretty seriously, pretty quickly. They did have to encounter the monster to really start believing her, which I also, I appreciate that too, because a lot of horror books, it's like the parents, don't believe their children when there's a monster around, and then the parents, it's like either the parents get eaten at the end or like it's not until like the last minute that the monster is revealed to the parents. So this author does that pretty early on in the book where the parents get involved, and I appreciate that. Yes. Sorry, but yes, no, it's very scary.
I am like so tense right now.
I know.
I was doing so good. I had my big girl pants on, and
Well, how about a horror book you could read with kids?
Yeah.
now this is something we can get behind.
Yeah, I have a lot of people ask me, because I do picture books and because I do love horror, they're like, well, what should my kids read? Growing up, I think scary stories to tell in the dark are such classics, and they're so good, and they were banned for a reason. Like the pictures are a little gruesome, but I think that's also part of the draw. But also another one of my favorite for kids is The Skull by John Clausen, which is this short novella that you could split it maybe between 2 or 3 nights if you're just reading to your child late at night. But it's about a little girl, and she walks through the woods, and she comes upon this castle, and there's a skull she finds in this castle, and they become friends. And the tone it's serious, but child serious. So it's not goofs and gags. It's this child is taking her friendship with this skull very seriously. There's the skull's body, like the rest of the skeleton keeps trying to find him, and it's a little unnerving. I love the face you just made, Jamie. But they're basically just trying to outrun the skull's body. And which makes for a very cute story, but it's a little spooky for kids and a little like high tension for them, but at an appropriate level. And there's just this really nice friendship between the two of them. It's heartwarming and tender, and I love some tender in my horror.
I really like John Clausen as a spooky adjacent illustrator too, where even his picture books for super younger kids,
The board books
and board
that we have,
books,
yeah.
you know, they're a little darker in their imagery, and they still are beautiful, right? And age appropriate. So I feel like he does a really great job of bringing the spooky to a younger crowd.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to plug? Did we get it all in?
I don't think so. I hope everybody has a happy Halloween. Again, come to Adult Swim at the Madison Children's Museum, either now or we have another one coming up in December. Come to Downtown Halloween Fun next week, October
30th, not the
30th.
31st.
Yes. Thursday evening on Real Halloween. Stay safe and have fun and read some spooky, scary books. Push your boundaries in a way that's healthy and safe.
Thank you so much for being our gateway into horror.
I know. I
Yippee.
feel like you were a great guide. I also we can't stop without mentioning your hair clips, which are
Yes.
little skeleton hands.
Oh, thank you.
And they're so on brand of like cozy, but
Creepy.
scary at the same time. I feel like that's great.
Thank you.
It's a great touch.
Really appreciate it. I'm at my most powerful during this time of year. And I'm so excited to, terrorize and wreak havoc, etc.
Thank you for sharing some of your power.
Thank you. I'm transferring my powers to you.
Ooh. Our coven grows stronger.
All right. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
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 Book Pop Podcast is presented by Lake City Books. Produced by Jamie Anderson and Molly Fish. Edited by Jamie Anderson. Music and art by Lovick. Follow us on Instagram at bookpop.podcast. Find out more at our website, bookpoppodcast.com.